Welcome, fabulous 7th grade RLA teachers. The STAAR interim testing has been completed. Thank you all so much for your efforts are getting this task accomplished. So now what? Well, we see what the results reveal to us. Remember that the interims are intended to measure a student's understanding of a broad band of SCs or student expectations. Because of the nature of the assessments, I broke up the data dialogue webinar into two parts. Today, we will do part one. Part one will target the section that all students took, and part two will target the low track. You'll get a better idea as to what that means when we get into the webinar. Let's get started. So let's get ready for a day of learning. You will need a copy of the data dialogue booklet, pictured here, pen or pencil, and a highlighter. Sticky notes, they're optional. I love sticky notes, and I will find any reason to use them. Before reviewing the results, let's take a quick look at the basics regarding the assessment. Linear multi-stage testing. The interim assessments for mathematics, reading, algebra 1, English 1, and English 2 are multi-stage adaptive test forms. Multi-stage tests begin with a section that is the same for all students. This section is called Section 1. After completing Section 1, students are routed to an appropriate Section 2 test that is either low, medium, or high in difficulty based on their performance on Section 1. It is important to remember that multi-stage tests for interims are on grade level. The benefit of multi-stage tests is that they provide the same level of accuracy as a linear test, but they do it with fewer questions. The STAAR interim blueprint, the reporting categories are just the same as STAAR. Reporting category 1 is understanding across genres. Reporting category 2 is understanding analysis of literary text. And reporting category 3 is the understanding and analysis of informational text. Each has a certain number of questions. Reporting category 1 has 6, reporting category 2 has 14, and reporting category 3 has 12, for a grand total of 32 multiple choice questions on the interim. I wanted to point out that the actual STAAR for 7th grade reading has 42 questions. And remember, the STAAR interim had 32 total questions. Next, I want to provide you with some broad details as to what was tested on the interim in each category. Reporting category 1, ladies and gentlemen, had the vocabulary questions. Reporting category 2 only has the literary passages. And reporting category 3 has the informational passages. Let's take a look at additional details regarding the assessment. All students were given questions 1 through 16. Questions 1 through 8 assessed with a fiction piece titled From a Cook It Kinda Perfect. Questions 9 through 16 assessed with an informational piece titled A Fortress on Wheels. Thereafter, depending on how students performed in questions 1 through 16, students were routed to low, medium, or high route. So let's take a look at each. So if students were routed into the low tier, students received a dramatic piece. So they got a drama piece titled A Star-Spangled Catastrophe and an informational piece titled Biblio Burro. For the medium route, students also received a fiction piece, The Winter Hibiscus, which those of you who are seasoned 7th grade teachers may seem familiar to you, and that is because it's a 2019 release selection. And then they also got an informational selection, Turning Waste into Energy, and this one too may be familiar to you 7th grade teachers because it too was a 2019 release section. Students routed into the high area. They also received a fiction piece titled From the Highest Tide and got the same informational piece that students in the medium route got, Turning Waste into Energy. The only difference was that the questions differed from the medium questions. Whether students were sent into a low, medium, or high route, students received an additional literary and an additional informational piece. At this point during the webinar, please feel free to hit pause and resume when you are ready. Again, that's a team decision. Let's move into how students performed. The data analysis process will be the same. You're familiar with here's what, so what, now what. We've used this one for 4 and 9 weeks assessment data analysis. What will be different this time, ladies and gentlemen, is that for the sake of time, I will be providing you with the key findings or the facts, the here's what, regarding the data, particularly because the data among campus is very, very similar in nature. Your main work as an RLA team will be to discuss the so what and the now what. So let's get going. Be sure that you have the data protocol handy. Remember that we're going to start with here's what. So be ready to take some notes. You might consider writing a little bit smaller so that you can be sure and fit all your notes. And of course, that would be up to you. So this is our first set of data. Overall performance by campus for reporting category. Please know that the data you are seeing here is a summative. Yeah, I repeat, it's a summative of how students performed for all the questions they took. So that includes a performance for all students and then the data for the tracks, the low, medium, or high. Just as a reminder, for the interim, reporting category 1 data is in regards to vocabulary. So R1 is for vocabulary, in case you want to make a note of that. So R1 is vocabulary, and that applies to all genres. R2 contains the data for literary texts. R3 contains the data for informational texts. So you all ready to write this down? Here's what. First, students performed better in reporting category 1. Second, between literary and informational text, students performed better in informational, albeit by very little. Students were neck and neck when it comes to performance between the two genres. Third, in regards to the special populations, the gaps between overall and special population performance varies anywhere from 15 to 20 points. In addition, for the most part, special education students performed lower than our EL students. At this time, please feel free to add any other facts you notice. I know that we all tend to look at our campuses, right? So you may want to look specifically at your data for your campus, and by all means, you can add any other facts that you notice. If need be, please feel free to pause the webinar and resume when you are ready. So that was the reporting category data. Now we're moving into our next data set, which is how students perform by SE, or the student expectation. Remember that all students completed questions 1 through 16, one fiction selection, questions 1 through 8, from a Crooked Kind of Perfect, and one informational selection, that was questions 9 through 16, and the title of the piece was A Fortress on Wheels. So let's take a look at the SEs that were tested for questions 1 through 16. So this is a performance by SE, so let me take a brief moment to explain what is on this report. When I ran the report on Eduphoria, ladies and gentlemen, I was given all the SEs that were tested in each of the sections, all students, low, medium, and high. So you will see all the SEs across the top. 7A, 7.2A, 7.2B, 7.2C, 7.5F, etc., etc. What is on the first set of data is what SEs were tested for all students in questions 1 through 16. So you'll notice that underneath the SC, you will see the question number. And again, we're only looking right now at the 16 questions that all students took. So question 2 was 2A, 2B was question 13, 5F had several questions, 1, 5, 7, 9, 12, 14, and 16. 7A was question 3, 7B was question 5, 8D1 was question 11, 8D3 was question 15, 9E was question 6, and finally 9F was question 6. Notice that the highly tested SC on this assessment for questions 1 through 16 was 5F, which is inferencing. All the other SCs only had one question. Just a reminder, for those that don't have questions under them, like 5H, it means that that SC was not tested for questions 1 through 16. So don't be distracted by things that don't have a question. Right now, focus on only those SCs that actually do have a question number. You will see on this page the performance by campus for questions 1 through 16. If need be, you may refer to your at-a-glance document if you'd like more specifics on the SC. So what are the facts? What's the here's what for this SC report? Let's take a look at that. So here's what regarding this data piece for the student expectation. Get ready to write down some facts regarding the district data. First, students performed in the upper 40s in 2A and 2B, which is the vocabulary. Those are the vocabulary SCs. Second, students scored 49% for the highly tested SC, which is 5F. Third, students scored in the 60s for the author's craft SCs, and that is 9E and 9F. Fourth, in all remaining SCs, students scored in the 40s. Finally, when it comes to special populations, EL students performed slightly higher than special education students. Our particular interest, though, is 7.7D. SPED students perform significantly lower than EL students. At this time, you may choose to stop the webinar to add your own facts for your campus, and you may resume when you are ready. So next, what we're going to do is take a look at the selections, and for time's sake, we will only look at the questions for the SC that was highly tested on this assessment, and in this case, it was 5F. This one had several questions. If, however, your team is interested in looking at the other questions, please reach out to me. I would be more than happy to send you the remainder of the questions. I do want to inform you that the test is not available for download on the reporting site. So what you will see is the cut and paste version of the test. I took snapshots and then added them to this PowerPoint. Students did not see it this way, so it's very important for you to know that this is not the way the students saw it. Rather, they saw it on the testing format, on the testing site. I apologize in advance, ladies and gentlemen, for the size of the font and also for those questions that may seem a bit blurry. So this is the fiction selection that students saw in the assessment. It was an excerpt from A Crooked Kind of Perfect. Typically, as the great readers that we are, we look at the title to give us some kind of hint as to what the selection may be about. This one, however, may prove to be a bit challenging. It's more of an oxymoron. I'm thinking crooked perfect. Then I also noticed the selection has what appears to be subtitles or subheadings. You'll notice where it starts, where it says how it was supposed to be. Then a little bit further down after line 12, how it is. After line 15, it reads on paper. So I was a little baffled by that. It's the first time I see something like this. So I was wondering a little bit about that, ladies and gentlemen. So this excerpt is about a young girl who wants to play the piano, so her dad enrolls her in a piano class. But it's a piano class for senior citizens, and it's being conducted by a man who claims he has a revolutionary way of learning how to play the piano, and that would be using a cardboard cutout for the keys. So, if you haven't done so already, please take some time now to quickly read the selection. This is going to really help when it comes down to looking at the questions. Remember, you can pause the webinar if need be. Next is the informational selection, Fortress on Wheels. But looking at the title and subtitles and all the visuals that we are provided with, all the pictures here, as readers, we can tell that the selection will be about the president's car, its history, its parts, and its most current status. The selection continues on the next slide. The selection has all the typical characteristics of an informational selection. And this is just simply the continuation of that selection on Fortress on Wheels. So let's start looking at the data for the highly tested SC, and in this case for 7th grade, we're only going to be looking at 5F. We will be looking specifically at those questions now. Be ready to take some notes on the here's what column. We will start with the 5F questions for fiction. 5F is make inferences and use evidence to support understanding. The questions that you see here are from A Crooked Kind of Perfect. Remember that we are looking at district data, especially since campuses perform very similarly. But if you would like to look specifically at your campus data, you let me know and I would be happy to help. Just as a quick reminder, we've used this process before. What you see boxed in red here is the answer. The percentages you see is how students performed on the assessment. So let's start with question 1. It reads, The description of the piano at the Eastside Senior Center illustrates the fact that the narrator is. Notice, ladies and gentlemen, that students were all over the place on this one. 35% of students in the district got the answer right. 31% were distracted by A, 25% by B, and 8% by C. For this question, students had to return to paragraph 19 of the selection. In this paragraph, the narrator provides a poor description of the piano, thus leading us to choice D. All the other answer choices would not be supported by paragraph 19. So here's what. Students selected answers that had nothing to do with the paragraph that they had to analyze. Let's move on to question 4. The narrator's passion for playing the piano is best expressed through 44% of the students got the answer correct, so they performed better than they did on question 1. 28% were distracted by C, 16% by B, and 12% by A. The question is about her passion and how she expresses it. The details noted in answer choice C were not part of the selection. The instructor did not model specific techniques. In regards to choice B, the narrator tells her dad about wanting to play in Carnegie Hall. She is outright about that, so she doesn't have to be honest per se. When it comes to choice A, although the details did occur in the selection, it is not what shows her passion. On the contrary, she was baffled by all that was going on with him. She was not fascinated. So here's what. Students were distracted by an event that did not happen in the story in this particular question. Let's move on to question 7. So this next question, question 7, is still from the fiction selection. It reads, the final sentence of the selection emphasizes the narrators. 44% of students got the answer correct. 24% were distracted by B, 19% by A, and 14% by D. In the final sentence, the instructor tears out the cardboard keyboard and it makes a rip sound. The narrator states that it was the first and only time that the keyboard makes a sound. In looking at the last sentence, it is evident that she feels nothing but disappointment, and not anxiety, curiosity, nor impatience, especially since she states that it is the one and only time it makes a sound. So here is what. Students selected answers that did not reflect how the narrator was actually feeling, given the evidence in the last sentence. Let's move on to the 5/8 questions now for the informational selection. So here is the first question for 5F for A Fortress on Wheel, the informational piece. Notice already my woohoos there. Question 9, the modern presidential vehicle is often referred to as the Beast because it, and I was so excited, 77% of the students got that one correct. The same thing for question 12. The author includes the details in paragraph 7, most likely to, and the answer was A, and 72% of students got that correct. So way to go, 7th graders. Let's move on to the last two 5/8 questions for the informational selection. So this one, we can see already just by the data that with questions 14 and 16, students, 7th graders found these to be a little bit more challenging. So question 14 reads, what is the author's main purpose for writing this article? 52% of students chose the correct answer, which was D, while 27% of students were distracted by C. Choice D is partially correct. Notice that choice D has both the history and current features, which envelops the entire selection. Although students were not in the 70s on this one, they were not all over the place like the others for 5F. They were distracted primarily by one other answer choice, and that was D. Let's look at 16. It reads, read this sentence for paragraph 6. The special satellite phone and secure video keep the president in contact with his top advisors. 47% of students chose the correct answer, which was B. 21% were distracted by choice A. So I'm thinking that more than likely students were distracted with the word technology here and connected it to the phone and the video system. Choices C and D are not related to the sentence provided in the question. Let's get ready to jot down our final notes for the here's what. So here's what. Out of the 4 5/8 questions for the informational passage, the Fortress on Wheels, students did well on 2 of them. Students overall did better on the 5-8 questions for the informational selection versus the fiction selection. At this time, you may choose to stop the webinar to discuss any additional facts regarding the item analysis. If you choose to do that, you can resume when you are ready. You now have your notes for Here's What. Remember that we only focused on 5F. You are now ready to move on to the So What and Now What components. This webinar concludes Part 1. Part 2 is coming soon. Please stop the webinar and discuss the Here's What statements and then complete the So What and Now What columns as a grade level team. By all means, reach out to me with any questions or requests you may have. I am here at your service. Thank you all for participating in this webinar.